then please could you turn your video off? Otherwise, we love to see you, of course. The timing of this session is an hour. We are finishing the main session at 8. But as with all of the sessions in this series, we've got an optional extra half an hour. So to run this tonight from 8 to 8:30 for anybody who wants to stay on and continue the conversation, share more stories, ask more questions. We love to do that, and that's gone really well in the last 2 sessions. So if you do want to stay on, please feel free to do that. That would be great. I think that's it really for the housekeeping stuff. We're not doing breakouts tonight. These are quite short sessions, and we've got 3 people speaking, so we're just going to crack on with the input and have plenty of time during and in between the presentations for you to make comments. Please use the chat. Please put your hands up, or even shout out at me if I don't see that your hand is up, because sometimes I don't manage my screen so well and I don't see. But please feel free to ask questions. And I think all of the people speaking tonight are very happy for you to interrupt them as they're speaking if there's a burning question, and just do the discussion as we go along. If you want to do that, you're very welcome. But there'll be plenty of time in between the presentations for discussion. Tonight, as you know, is about using our church's outside spaces. This is very loosely interpreted. Essentially, it's strange when you look on Eco Church, and of course this tonight's session comes under Eco Church, the land section primarily. And if you look there, I think they need to rewrite it. They have under some of their criteria a sort of get out clause that suggests that you might have insufficient land for doing this or that. And actually, as I think you'll see in the creative ideas tonight, there is no such thing in our minds as insufficient land. And I think we hope to prove that through some really ingenious practice that is going on around and about. So we look forward to sharing stories. And I think also, I think we're looking forward very much to this session, because this session is essentially addressing, I suppose, the biodiversity crisis. Our other sessions and most of our raison d'etre is to address the climate crisis. But I think many of us really respond, of course, both because we need to respond, obviously, to the huge biodiversity crisis that was the parallel situation to climate. And of course, they're completely intertwined. But also, I think it gives joy and positivity to the kind of work that we can do in churches, because it takes us out. It takes our young people out into the great outdoors. And there's a great deal to be really celebrated and enjoyed in that approach to this part of Eco Church and environmental work in our churches. So really glad that you're all here. I'm going to introduce Debbie Collins from Holy Cross, Billesley. Debbie, thank you so very much for being here, and we really look forward to hearing what you've got to say. Over to you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to share this with you. I'm going to hopefully now screen share. Okay. So at Holy Cross, we have, you can just see the edge of a door there. That's a fire door at the back of the church centre, which goes out onto what was just really sort of overgrown weeds and grass and a scout's shed. So inspired by the Eco Garden in Northfield, we put a proposal to our Scouts groups of how we could work together and make that space into an eco garden. If I can say about how large it is, on the flat bit of lawn, you can put up a bouncy castle, and often that is in use for that reason when the hall is used for parties. But if you go further, if you went beyond the space for a bouncy castle, the grass continues, it sort of dips down a little bit, and we've left that to grow longer, and planted a little trinity of apple trees. Often we've got no funding for this. We've sort of used resources that we've either found or we've been given. So you can see the use of the tyres. The scout groups had great fun in going around the area and finding the tyres and painting them, and then we've planted them up. You can see some lavender in there. They also painted some stones to decorate the area, and we've had to go at growing some beans. And you can see that obviously the planting is only very small at that point. And I'm just thinking, how do I make this go on to the next slide? Let me have a look.
You use the arrow key on your keyboard.
Oh, okay.
Right.
You can tell I'm not great at doing this. Okay, so go back to that one then. So the arrow key. Oh, wonderful.
There you go.
Thank you. Oh, Caroline. So our eco garden was sort of launched at Harvest in 2019. You can see recycled tent poles that have been used to edge the border. We also used some Wellington boots to plant up some French marigolds. So there was great fun. And this was a harvest service, which we started in church and then continued outside. So Scouts groups joined us for that service, and we're very proud to present the garden then for open. We've invited local school, and particularly Dame Ellen Pinsent School, School for Additional Needs, to come and help us with some planting and watering. You can see a little bug hotel in the corner there. We've also got a larger bug hotel across the other side of the garden. When the school came, we showed them a solar fountain. And they had to, before we sort of got it working, they had to guess how high the water fountain would go, see if they could jump as high as they thought the water would go, and they absolutely thought that was brilliant. And that was the solar fountain. I came across that idea in lockdown when Gardener's World started to show viewers gardens. So we also like to use our outside space in the parish. So we've very blessed with Billesley Common and the recreation ground. So we began to do some muddy church walks. And what we encourage with a prayer at the start of the walk is that we really slow down and look at everything around us and appreciate what is in season, what we find, and have conversations together. Often we find litter, so that gives us opportunity to talk with the children that we're with and families about, why that's a bad thing for the environment. And sometimes we do take litter pickers and bags with us, but really it's about a meditative walk and enjoying that outside space together. And you see it's quite a good group there. We've often had dog walkers join us. There's often a gentleman on a mobility scooter. So an intergenerational opportunity to get out together. It's an accessible path, either through Billesley Common or the recreation grounds. So it's not a problem with people, sort of, if you've got reduced mobility. We take it at a slow pace for everybody to be able to join in. Often we've got people with very good cameras with them who like to take photos of the wildlife and flowers. often we stop and see if we know what these things are ourselves, and sometimes we're using our phones to look up whether we've got an app to show us what these things are. But we're sort of being we're informing each other as we go. I'm certainly no expert when it comes to sort of seeing wildflowers and wildlife, so we're just learning together as we go through the walk. We pick up our nature finds along the way, and then we create a picture. Often we leave it in the shape of a heart or whatever the children and young people decide to come up with, and then we leave that there for others to... Again, seeing butterflies. Looks like I've got my flip-flops on and I'm in the stream there. So we're looking at all the different types of vegetation around, and just having some fun together as well. And then the artwork that you can see on the wall, that came as a intergenerational community project that we'd got some funding for. We worked with a charity in Unity, which is a youth charity, in conjunction with our place of welcome, where we were having older people come. And through the summer of 2019, we had something called Welcoming Wednesdays. And with the we took over the hall and had clay to mould with different shapes with cutters, and we created these birds. You can see the word eco up there, so everybody knew that they were contributing to something that was going to be put up in the eco garden on the wall. Because there was the kiln broke and then the pandemic came in, this project was only painted up and produced like this last year, and we finally had it put up. It was so you can see that somebody's put the date there, 2019, when we started it. I can't believe it took us so long to get it up, but it's absolutely beautiful, and it's really lovely to see that in the eco garden. And this is just the start, really. We've got other things that we want to do. We've got a composter made from pallets, that's across the other side of the car park. And so I'd like us to put in a water butt. That's something that I'd like us to try this year. I think, is that the end of my photos? Yes. Sorry, Marilyn, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Is that the end of your talk as well? Is that the end of your, that's the end of your photos? Is there other things you wanted to say, Debbie?
Well, I think certainly the schools have been really keen to come and visit us. So that's what, even though we've got quite a small patch, I would say don't hesitate to, invite schools to come in and plant some seeds, or even just to have a look around at what you're doing, and to just encourage that sort of that network across the community, and being out and about on our muddy church walks, where we offer a little bit of refreshment at the end, either as a picnic on site, or we go to a local cafe and offer some refreshment to the families and folk that come. We see people. It enables us to tell people along the way what we're up to, and then we usually do a post on Facebook as well. Anything that we're doing in the church and centre, we put on our church Facebook page. Lovely photos, and again, just to get that message out into the wider community about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Always mentioning Eco Church, and often a prayer will go in with those posts as well.
Fabulous. So exciting. Just before we come on to discussion and questions and comments, can I just double check? There were one or two people who were trying to get onto the chat and couldn't. Can you just wave at me or tell me if that's still a problem, or have we solved that now?
It's not the chat, it's the meeting itself. I've checked with Hillary. And as we haven't got a waiting room, the only thing I could suggest was was if they perhaps tried coming out and then trying to come in
Oh,
again.
okay.
And we do seem to have an extra. Theo and Sheila may have joined us recently, so I don't know if they're from Hilary's church.
Okay. All right. So we seem to probably have got over those problems. Okay, that's great. Good. Okay, thanks, Caroline. So now, Debbie, that was super. So rich in ideas, questions, comments, shared experiences. It's over to you now for 5 or 10 minutes. Anybody want to come in here? Please either wave. Sandra, have you got your hand in the air?
I'm unmuting. There we go.
Ah, yeah.
Debbie, I really loved the mosaic that you put, the picture that you put in the garden. I didn't catch what you'd made it from. I know you said the kiln broke. Does that mean it was made from clay?
Yes, it was clay. So we molded the clay and had cutters, all these different lovely bird shapes, but you could just make things from hand as well. So actually the detail of it is beautiful. And then it was fired. And then we had another thing last summer where we invited people back to do the painting of it. So it's been quite a protracted sort of time getting it together, but it's been well worth it.
I know. And then just to carry on, because I really think this is just such a lovely idea and it's so beautiful and it's there. And did you then sort of varnish it or do something with it to protect it?
The artists that worked with us knew that it was going to be outside. So it's been varnished and it's put on Correx board. And we did attempt to put the Correx board, the artist thought that it was going to stay up with like Gorilla Glue, no nails kind of thing. Well, it didn't. No. It fell off the wall. I said it really needed to be drilled into the wall, but she wasn't keen. So Scouts have helped us again, been absolutely fantastic. We got some recycled wood, and so they've now secured it robustly to the wall, and it will stay up. I think it's a little bit protected in the position that we've got it in. And I actually think some of the brickwork, it would be nice to do some colours, take some bricks. So we're hoping now that that's the start of more artwork, really, in the eco garden.
But was it special outdoor paint that you used, or did you varnish the individual pieces, or what did you do?
Well, the artist took it away to kind of because I think once they were painted, did that I presume that they might have, I don't know if they had to go back into the I don't know. But she actually pieced it together. She had the vision for what she wanted the overall picture to look like. So we just sort of contributed to that, and sort of thought that probably I tried to kind of say I'd like sort of some wavy lines and stuff like that, but felt it was better to hand over to the person who was who'd had the sort of the vision from the start when we first talked about it. But they're heavy pieces. It's I hope it kind of it stays up.
Hilary, you've got a question in the chat, haven't you? Do you want to ask it yourself?
Sure. So you mentioned a funding organization, and by the way, I just love all of your ideas. I think they're amazing, so inspiring, and seems just like really is really helpful. So, but I think you mentioned a funding organization. I didn't quite catch that.
Well, that was for the clay work only. We didn't have any funding for anything we've done in the garden other than the artwork. And that was we had some money from Big Lottery, and that was to do with healthy relationships. And so In Unity was the youth charity, and we talked about working with them on an intergenerational project. So healthy relationships in the community working together. So it was through Big Lottery that we got some funding to do that.
Great. Well, I loved all the recycling ideas you posted too, that because that's affordable for anybody, right? So
yeah, absolutely. We've got we've recently had a few legacies come into our church, but generally, we haven't got a lot of money at all, and so we're very good at being creative.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is anybody waving at me? Because I can't see any hands up. Just, yes, Philippa?
Oh, hi, Debbie.
Hello, Philippa.
Hi. Yes, I was just going to ask, your walking group, were they an existing group, or did you get together purely to do, what did you call it? Did you call it
Muddy
Church?
Muddy Church.
Muddy Church.
Sort of is something in their own right, and there's resources which you can get, and often it's to do with kind of we put in sort of scavenger hunts and things like that, but actually the families just love slowing down. So we just said we were going to meet at a particular point, spend about an hour in this outside space, and just take in, really notice what's around us and appreciate God's creation and just enjoy that meditative walk. And it really is therapeutic. I really look forward to them. And actually it's much easier to put together than a messy church. Generally in the holidays we do a messy church on a Tuesday and then a muddy church walk on a Thursday. And of course you need lots of pre-planning, all the resources, all the creativity for messy church. And this, you just go out into that outside space and God's got it all there for us.
What is it? Is that an after school slot?
No, we generally do our messy church and muddy church in the school holidays. So that's how our rhythm is at Holy Cross.
Okay, thank you. Well done. I think they're all great.
Thank you.
Yes, Muddy Church, you just Google Muddy Church and it'll come up, and it's got lots of ideas, its own website and everything. Yeah, a bit like Messy Church, it's a parallel to that. Yes, anybody else with their hands up, comments, questions? Yell out at me if I'm missing you.
Ruth, I think.
Yes, Ruth, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say we've got a sort of equivalent, which is Wild Church, which we do the first and third Sundays of the month, and it's really a family-based one, which actually takes place in the churchyard itself. We don't tend to venture out of the churchyard, and we take a theme like water or nature or nuts or leaves or something like that, and pick up things around the church, make collages of them, and say a few prayers, sing a few songs, and same sort of thing, but slightly cleaner. A bit precious over in Northfield.
Ruth, did you say that you actually do that during church time? Do you?
Yeah, it is. It's
liturgical, as it was a part of the Sunday event.
It's only about 3/4 of an hour to an hour, depends on how enthusiastic everybody is. But it's the first. It starts at 4, usually finishes at 5, and it's the first and third Sunday of the month.
Oh, I see. Okay, interesting.
It's been going for about a year now. So
interesting. Sue, come in.
Hi everybody. We have what we call outdoor church at Christ Church, and it takes place on the third Sunday in the month, and it's at it's during the service. We have a Holy Communion service on that third Sunday, and in outdoor church we don't necessarily have the same theme as the Bible readings and things in the main church service. Sometimes we do, but it's a time when we use our closed burial ground as well. We've got one side that the council maintains, so there's lots of mown grass, which is great for meeting on, and then we've got the other side, which is the conservation area, which we're trying to maintain an organic hay meadow. There are various different resources called outdoor church that the leaders actually plan together to use. It's usually about 3/4 of an hour, and we'll have prayer, Bible reading, and an activity that are all kind of linked together. And then we go back into church to share communion with the rest of the congregation.
Okay, that's interesting. Very useful. Thank you. Very interesting range of models and ways of doing things. I think that's fantastic. I think we will move on now. Debbie, thanks so much for sharing all of that and prompting all that discussion. We'll move on to Sandra Walton now. Welcome, Sandra, from Cotteridge Church. Please tell us your story.
Yes. Well, now, I don't know what everybody can see at the moment, whether they can, thank you so much. Let me just say, I know you've got the pictures on the screen in front of you, but I just want to give a little bit of introduction. The Cotteridge Church is on a main traffic island in Cotteridge, and we've got pavement in front of the church, and then behind the church there's a small triangular space which you can see in the first picture. There's two entrances into this space, and really the space, as you can see there, is what we started from in 2021, 2 years ago. It all happened at the same time as we started our eco group, and so it was really important that we looked at what was around the church and what was outside. But at that point, the space which is at the back of the church was primarily used by smokers who came into the church cafe, used the toilets, and then came out into this piece of land at the back and stayed there and smoking. So there wasn't an invitation, there wasn't a feeling that this space was one to be celebrated or enjoyed, or where people would come to find tranquility, a bit of peace and calmness, and be able to sit and have a cup of tea. So we focused on what we could actually do with this piece of land. I think it was quite exciting at the time that the eco group was going, but also we had the Queen's Platinum Jubilee coming up, and also the church released a little bit of money for us and asked us to use that to support the creation of the garden. And so we got very excited. We asked as many people who wanted to join us. It was an open invitation to anybody in the church, uniform organisations, users of the building, to come and join us in this group, which we called the Garden Gang. And we met together. In the end, there was about 10 of us who met, and we looked at what we wanted from the garden. We wanted a beautiful space where people could enjoy. We wanted somewhere for fruit and vegetables to grow. We wanted a space where people could come out and use it. Can I just say as well that we did have at that point a greenhouse, but the greenhouse wasn't really very well used. So we thought, well, we've got this bit of money, we'll go ahead and we'll seek some advice by some garden landscape designers. Well, those of you who've ever encountered landscape designers know that they come at a cost and a price. And we were all a bit horrified. We all met them and shared ideas with them, got very excited until we received how much their quotes. And we realized that all the money we got could go just on the landscape designers. So we thought, we can't have this. We're just going to do it ourselves. So, and find people who could do it to help us. Now, if you look at as you're looking at screen, if you look on the left hand of the picture, you can see what an awful state that fence was in. It was horrible leylandi, covered with ivy, and you can just imagine what an eyesore it was. It didn't tempt you into the garden. And on the picture on the right hand side, you see the lovely Stephen, who has found somebody who took all the leylandi out. Peter and Tony from church helped as well. And then we put up this lovely fence, which opens up to a care home. So it's nice now that as they walk down into Cotteridge, they can look and see what's going in the garden. So first of all, we looked at what we got, and we got this horrible flower bed. It was a raised bed, but it was made all out of bricks, and it really blocked the way into the garden. So Stephen and his wife and lots of other people helped to demolish this brickwork, and then we used the soil that was there, and we put that round the edge of the flower beds, which are behind those benches that are there. So we didn't want to waste anything, and we've kept the bricks because we think we might be able to do with some of those in the future. You can also see by these two pictures the beauty, and I say that a bit sarcastically, of the garden furniture we had at that time. You can see it doesn't really lend itself greatly to enjoying a bit of a sit in the sun. And you can see the bin on the wall as well, ready for the cigarette butts. So altogether, it wasn't a happy space, and it wasn't a space that was used. So on we went, and fortunately last year, it was a bit warmer in the spring. So we were able to work outside, as you can see, and that was probably March. We got going in the January of last year, so we'd got 5 months to sort of work on it before we got to the Platinum Jubilee. You can see behind Stephen, there's some posts sticking up. Those posts were placed ready for some espalier apple trees, because we wanted to be able to grow as much as we could to use in the church kitchen. But you might see those as we go further on. If you could have the next slides, please, Caroline. Thank you. So here we are. If we go to the right-hand side one first, got a little bit more garden furniture in there now, but not a lot of planting going on. The person in purple is Barbara Calvert, who's a Methodist minister who has joined us at Cotteridge. And she was sort of a part of this group and sort of helped us and led us as we went along. And there we are, actually checking out what's going on and what's doing, and coming along to help. We always had a cup of tea together and sat down and worked out where we got to, what we needed to do next. And also involved members of the church community that are there during the week. We're very fortunate. We've got a day centre, which has got people with dementia that come. They use the garden, had used a greenhouse. We've got a group of people called C2U, which is adults, young adults learning difficulties. And they were involved in planning the garden as well. And to some extent, the Boys Brigade and the Brownies and Guides. But obviously, we met during the day, and that precluded some help from them. But they did have an input in some of the other things. Chris and I here made a wonderful trip with this bit of money we had to Castle Nurseries, which have an incredible amount of plants there at very reasonable prices. So we filled the car ready. You can see it's red, white and blue, which was going to celebrate, well, you can't see the blue, but there's some pansies at the back there, I think, celebrate the Queen's Jubilee. Chris has been absolutely incredible, one with sunglasses, in pioneering the garden through some quite difficult times, and is a big tribute to her that the garden has come to being what it is. And all of this obviously was feeding into the eco group, because we were looking at ways to attract butterflies, wildlife into the garden, and also obviously growing vegetables. Could you go to the next one, Caroline? Thank you. So the blue notice, the church garden, is what faces the pavement area in Cotteridge itself. And you can see just a little bit. I know there's a horrible bin in the way there, but that's not usually there. But you can see it goes a short path, small, very narrow path, goes side of the church into this area at the back. And we have a gate there, obviously for security. But then when people are working in the garden, the gate is open. So if anybody wants to come and be in the garden as they're walking past, they can do. It was thought that it would be rather lovely to have something content, people be able to come and sit and read. And so as a part of the Bible garden in this very small area, we've got this poem, but we've also tried to include some plants that are named in the Bible. So we've got some lilies, we've got some herbs. So that is just a wall, and on the wall there is obviously plants that are referred to in the Bible. So that was quite exciting to research, and then also this poem for people to read when they're sitting in the garden and enjoying the open space and the lovely plants that are there. You go on to the next one, please, Caroline. Thank you. So, as you know, last year, the Platinum Jubilee was quite wet that weekend, so we couldn't have the outdoor service to bless the garden that day. But the following Sunday was beautiful, so we all went outside for the service to celebrate the garden. You can see in front of Barbara on the step there that there's a lovely big trough there which is filled with tomatoes, and then on the walls we've got some clematis there as well, and in front of it, as a part of the garden, we planted lots of trees, and that one is an apple tree there, and as I said, behind the people on the fence there's lots of espalier apple trees there as well. So you can see from the one where we're celebrating the service how small that space is. Of course, we jet washed the tiles as well, which needed the bricks needed a good wash. But it was lovely to see it in the sunshine, and you can just imagine the joy and happiness that service brought to us all as we celebrated together. If you could go to the next one, Caroline, thank you. All right. So this is one thing, a wonderful thing that's happened, as well as everybody celebrating the garden. We have a group that uses the garden every week called Little Foxes, and it's for parents with preschool children. And somebody comes, Sue comes, who leads this, and she has activities ever so similar to what Debbie and Ruth have described in their church, activities that are completely all about nature, either with leaves or stones or nuts or things that she has brought in for the children to do, and then they make pictures and do all sorts of activities in this space. So this is a new group that started. She isn't part of the church community, church membership, but when she saw the space, she thought it was perfect because it was enclosed and perfectly safe for parents with young children. And in the front of the church, we did plant the silver birch for the Queen. And obviously that's there. And the silver birch looks absolutely beautiful. It's just coming into leaf now. But that's at the front of the church. And on the next slide, thank you, Caroline, you can see the front of the church. And what we've endeavoured to do here is put some planters in front of the windows over the other side. They've mainly got flowers in. And then as a part of this too, we thought that the cross should go in outside in front of the church. And even though some people thought maybe this should come down, just be up there for Easter, many people just wanted the cross to stay there, and that's an opportunity there. We planted lots of different things that attract bees and butterflies. The old benches which were in the garden have now come into the front of the church, and as I drive past, it gives you a wonderful sense that people are enjoying the space when you see people sitting there or sitting on the one particularly by the blue door, which is in the shade, and enjoying that space now rather than just it being a walk through. So I know I've gone on a lot about what we did, but I think some of the important things were that we really enjoyed working together as a group and including other people, other people from within the groups within the church. C2U and the Day Centre used the greenhouse in order to germinate plants and pot up plants and plant bulbs, which they did this year. We also were able to use the beans. We grew runner beans up that new fencing, apples, tomatoes and herbs. they're all being used in the church kitchen, and a notice was put on the in the cafe that they'd been used from the garden. So that was a wonderful celebration. And it sort of led on to celebrating that at harvest as well, when we received our bronze award for Eco Church. So we were really, really thrilled about that as well. But I think one thing it has done, it's raised awareness of gardens, what they mean, the outdoor space, that you, as we've said at the beginning, it doesn't matter how small the space is, it's possible to do so much and to make it into an area that everybody enjoys coming to, which they do now. So thank you, Debbie, for ideas, which I've got from you now, to enhance the garden even further. And yes, it's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity.
Thank you so much, Sandra. What a great account of transformation. And we've had 2 fantastic talks about urban settings with, actually not very much promising ground around it. We're talking about rolling meadows and extensive graveyards here. So heaps of ideas already. I'm actually not, I'm not going to take discussion around what you've just been talking about, Sandra, just at the moment. I'd like to actually, because I'm aware of the time, I'd just actually like to move on to Caroline's presentation. And then after that, I think we'll take comments and questions about both of yours, Sandra's and Caroline's presentations together, after Caroline has talked about something which I think is very compatible with what you've just said. Over to you, Caroline.
Oops, hang on. Thanks very much, Marilyn. Yeah, I worship at St Philip's in Dorridge, which, as you can see from the picture, is very different from both Debbie's and Sandra's church. It, in large part, because it's a brand new building. It only opened in September 2021, and that picture was taken at our open day when we opened, which in itself was amazing, because all the building took place during the lockdowns. So when everybody went out for their walks, they watched the old church, which was a late Victorian chapel of ease built on the cheap on inadequate foundations that was literally falling down, which is why we needed the new church. So they all watched the old church going down and the new church going up. And we invited everybody in the village to the open day. And because it was only partially out of lockdown, we had to do guided tours. So we had to count people in and out. And over the course of the day, we had just short of 3,000 people coming around. It was just a phenomenal day. And our eco group had a little table and we talked to people, because we had got our bronze award to coincide with the opening of the church. So our situation was that on the land we had a few mature trees. You can see the oak there and 1 or 2 others, and we tried to keep all of those where we could, but there were some areas that we had to clear. So what we did in consultation with Solihull Council was, in some areas, plant wildflower seeds, and in other areas it had a couple of more formal beds where we planted pollinator friendly plants. So you can see one of the beds around the big oak tree there, and we have another one at the front. And just so you can see, that's what it looked like at the front after it had been cleared, and just before we'd sown the wildflower seeds around there. And then the same at the back, at the side, just before we'd planted that. But you can see we kept, I mean, the council wouldn't have let us get rid of it, but we kept the California redwood. And at the side, again, we planted wildflower seeds, but we also, along the fence line, planted native hedgerow plants, which are bedding in nicely. So this was all in September 2021, and this is what it looked like in June 2022 across the back and the side. And people walk through from, there's a path goes through church land from the village up into the centre of the, from the centre of the village up into housing. And the number of comments we got from people as they walked through was just lovely. And then the poppies again were at the front, and then these other two are from the beds. And you might see in the middle one, there are several bees in that picture. We got lots of bees, not many butterflies. I'm hoping that as the years go on and as it establishes, we'll get more of that. So anyway, having done that, we thought, right, we are going to take part in Church's Count on Nature. Now, I don't know how much you know about it, but it's an initiative that's jointly the Church of England, Caring for God's Acre, a charity, and also A Rocha UK, the organisation behind Eco Church. This year, Church's Count on Nature Week is from Saturday the 3rd to Sunday the 11th of June. Though you don't have to stick absolutely rigidly to that, and you can actually input details at other times of the year. And what it encourages you to do is to observe and record the nature in your churchyard or church grounds. And it's intended to be a mix of encouraging everyone, young and old, in your congregation to be more aware of the nature around us and what we can do to protect it. But also, if you want to, it can also be a citizen science project. We did it on a pretty low-key basis because it was the first time we'd done it. We had identification guides for people for wildflowers and insects, and we provided forms for them to fill in what they saw and when. And I also had a go with one of the free apps that there is available for identifying wildflowers and plants. Once you've got your records, you can, if you want, just keep them for your own information, but you can submit them for them to be incorporated into a national map. So we submitted ours in paper form, and we were a bit surprised when they didn't appear in the national records. So we contacted them, and it turned out that to go on the national records, they have to be verified, and they don't have enough verifiers for paper records. So they are very much encouraging people to use the iNaturalist app. It's free. You can download it from the App Store, from Google, from other outlets. And we're going to have a go at that, though none of the core eco team are particularly tech savvy. But fortunately for people like me who aren't tech savvy, they have on the website, and this is a screenshot from the website with Love Your Burial Ground and Church's Count on Nature. They've got lots of materials, and one of them is a step-by-step instructions on how to use iNaturalist, both setting it up, identifying the plants and submitting the records. And there's also on the website lots of other information. They've got everything from posters to frequently asked questions. There's a 3-page guide to common wildflowers. They've even got a risk assessment template. And if you decide to run an event and register with them, you can ask them to provide free paper copies of their starter guide and guide to wildlife in burial grounds. So what I would say is, from our experience, have a go. Don't be put off by the fact that you might not have the greatest nature knowledge, or you're, like me, fairly technologically incompetent. Last year, Churches Count on Nature Week fell at the same time as our annual fun run and summer fair. So our eco group had a stall at the fair, and we had the forms so that people could take, and the guides so that people could take them away and look at the plants if they wanted to then. And we also gave out tiny packets of wildflower seeds and some homemade wildflower bombs that we just gave out to people, and that was very popular. So that's all I've got time for now, so as to leave time for questions. I would mention that our next door parish is completely different in terms of the church. It's Knoll Parish Church, where it's a 15th century church and guild house and an ancient burial ground. And I know there's at least Claire and Hugh from Knoll, and we haven't got time in the main section, but for any of you who want to stay on for the discussions, I'm sure they'll be happy to share a bit about some of the constraints that they have to work within, but also you can see, I believe they've got 150 trees in their churchyard, and so things that they're doing about measuring the carbon storage that's happening in those trees. So I will stop sharing now and hand back to Marilyn.
Thank you so much, Caroline. How extremely encouraging and interesting, and how different all these 3 stories have been. Right, over to everybody here. Please, please chip in with questions or sharing stories of your own. I'm again, wave at me like mad if I don't see your hand, or put question. Debbie. Yeah.
Thank you. Caroline, the wildflower seeds, how did you have to put them deep underground? Or were they just sort of on top and raked over? Because I'm never quite sure. I've got a few seed bombs and actually they need to go in, but I always think, oh, the ground isn't prepared enough.
I have to confess that because we liaised with the council, we got the contractors when they were doing the landscaping to actually sow the seed, because when we talked to the council said, right, you want this wildflower seed mix. So I don't know. I don't think they're planted very deep, because I mean wildflowers naturally sort of seed themselves, but I don't know for certain.
Yeah, definitely. They don't need to be deep at all. Just incorporated in the soil a little bit, even with a bit of sand over them. That's all. Yeah.
They can be surprisingly difficult, though. I think some people have struggled to get to take. Hugh, you've got an interesting question in the chat. Do you want to ask it?
Yes, we've done some similar things to St Philip's, where we've got quite a large churchyard, and we're a Victorian church, so the churchyard's been there for about 200 years. So we've been trying. We did do a little ecological survey 2 years ago, where we had 2 volunteer ecologists that came around for about 2 hours and made us a list. And in parallel, we were going around with children and adults. And it was very much intergenerational, and the children all enjoyed identifying things they'd never seen before, but the adults enjoyed it as well. So they learnt a lot, like we all did, because a lot of us are volunteers. But I was wondering for us whether there's a possibility of getting in contact with the Birmingham and Black Country Wildlife Trust, whether anyone knows anyone that works there. Because I think if you've got a big churchyard, I think you need a bit of advice from specialists to try and work out the best way to go forward. But, I think what we're doing, we're planning something on the 11th of June. We're calling it Wild Things. So it's just an opportunity for people to look at, we've described it, things that fly, things that rustle, things that flower. So we've got some volunteers to try and help identify things. And we've certainly gone down the route that Caroline mentioned of good nature of recording things. And we had the same problem, actually. They haven't come back to us confirming our list. So we've got a bit of work to do there. But yes, has anyone got any contacts of ecologists?
Well, Ruth has. Look what Ruth is holding up. Ruth, over to you. Ruth, you're muted.
Mute myself. I'm actually a member of the trust, but I don't really, I just get this sort of their little, I pay me money and I get a subscription. I pay my subscription and get some things in the way of, I mean, do you want any, I don't know anybody, but I've got addresses in here. And
yeah, well,
things. I mean, you can probably get those, but I don't know anybody personally.
No, it's mainly the personal thing.
Yeah.
I have looked them up on the website.
Yeah.
And I only spoke to a secretary, and I have a feeling that it won't get anywhere unless I actually try and get a contact properly.
Hugh, which church are you?
St James Hill, near Green, Sutton Coldfield.
Can I just say that Britwell URC have recently got plants to plant a native species hedge. They're doing a lot of work on, they've got a big piece of ground and they're doing a lot of work on it. And I believe that they got the hedging from the local wildlife trust. And I think it's free. But so if you contacted Britwell Church, I'll let you have the email, Hugh, address, and they'll probably be able to put you in touch with somebody.
Yeah.
That's useful, isn't it?
I think that was one thing because our churchyard been there for 200 years. At one stage, we were thinking about planting a new wildlife area. But after the survey, when we found we'd actually got 130 species of trees and flowers, we decided, well, no, we need to look after what we've got.
Oh, yes.
And that's the policy we've taken so far. But I still feel it would be, I think we've got to the stage now where a little bit of professional help would guide us for the next steps, really, because there's always a lot of things to do. And I think it's very exciting. Every church that's summarised tonight, you're all doing some magnificent things. And I think we should be really encouraged by that. And every church is slightly different, and you have to address it in the particular way that not only suits the environment, but the people you have. That's an important aspect, isn't it? Yeah. What people you can get involved to develop things.
Yes. That's a very good point, isn't it? Because the environmental work that we all do in whatever manifestation always illustrates that it is never one size fits all. It never is. It's feeling your way, isn't it? Can we I'm just going to ask Sue Sherwin, you were just, we're out of time on this, but Sue, you were going to make a comment in answer to Hugh, I think, a moment ago.
Yes, Pete and I are also members of the Wildlife Trust. We've had a huge amount of help from them in actually creating our nature conservation area back from 2013. I think if you go on the website, Hugh, you should be able to get a whole list of different staff members. Now, they should have a community engagement officer or somebody like that. I know they've had to reduce their staff over the last 2-3 years because of all the issues with COVID and stuff like that. But funding. But we've had an awful lot of help from them. The person we've been most helped by is Alison Wilkes, who is their senior conservation officer, but I'm sure there are other people within that. If you go to the website, I think you should be able to click on a link to show you who's there, but they've been extremely helpful. They so far they've conducted a wildlife survey for us once a year of the meadow area. They were actually the people who helped us do it in the first place. So I use that information to submit when it's Churches Count for Nature, because obviously that's been verified by a qualified person. I hope that helps. I've been furiously thumbing through my magazine and not actually found a list of staff members, but hopefully that'll be on the website.
Are you in the Birmingham country area? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you. We are out of time in terms of the main session. So quite informally, I'm going to sort of, as it were, close that now, and thank you all for coming. Please, obviously feel free to vote off if you would like to, but equally, please feel free to stay and continue this discussion. Whilst there are still people here, we're just going to roll on. So do please feel free to stay or leave. Now, Caroline, are you saying something, Caroline?
Well, Hilary and Philippa have both got their hands up. So
have they? Thank you. Okay, let's take Hilary. We've heard from Hilary once first. So let's take Philippa first. I don't think we've heard from you, Philippa. Let's take yours first.
Oh, hi. I was just going to say to you, it's worth putting out a request for any local naturalists who just live in your area, because we advertised a couple of years ago doing the nature count. And loads of people went, oh, I like grasses. Oh, I do trees. Oh, I do birds. And they just, it was wonderful, really, what local knowledge there was. So, yeah, if you've got any way you could advertise, or local naturalists, or, just keen naturalists. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Hilary, thank you very much, Philippa. Hilary, what were you going to say?
First of all, just amazing. All three of these were just so fantastic. So my question is, in one of our three churches, it has a lot of very old, 150 plus years old gravestones. Some of them are flat, and some of them are standing up, but they're really not well. They're very old and leaning and stuff, and so it really limits the area that we can walk on. The grounds, and I'm wondering, does anyone know who to contact, who to ask? Is it even okay to move the markers to some other place? Any thoughts on that? Thank you.
I'm looking for any responses there. Anybody want to come in on that one? Wave at me, or am I missing anybody wanting to respond to that, or shall I just ask you to have a think and put any comment in response to that in the chat? Can we just hold that a minute, and we'll come back to that, or put responses in the chat. Thanks, Hilary. Debbie, you've got an interesting question in the chat yourself. Do you want to ask it?
I'm looking again on the land part of the A Rocha survey, and obviously water is something which is in there. So that's another thing that I'd like to be doing with Scouts. But we want to keep it simple and not have to spend a lot of money. So I just wondered, how small a water feature has anybody put in? Has it been successful? And can you do something with a washing up bowl?
Or an old sink.
Sheena responds to that.
I haven't done it yet, but there are things happening in our land that make it impossible to carry out our plans. But what we were going to do was make a water feature with an old dustbin lid, a big metal dustbin lid. You can't really make a proper pond. You don't have children and dogs drowning in it or something like that. But, you know, we thought a very shallow water feature in this dustbin lid, and then a couple of other smaller sort of metal bowls would look quite nice, surrounding it with stones and, you know, pebbles and that sort of thing. So you just dig it into the ground, really. But you know, as I say, I haven't done it yet, but in my mind's eye, it looks wonderful.
There's very cheap solar water features. Like, Sandra, haven't you got one? Is it in your church or your garden? Don't
No,
you have a simple solar water feature?
It's actually in my garden, and I like somebody mentioned that during lockdown we all looked at other people's gardens on Gardener's World, and it was shown on there. And it's just like it just floats on the water. And then, you know, like Debbie was saying, I think as it warms up, so the height of the fountain gets bigger, and it's quite exciting to watch, and it's not very expensive. So that was, you know, I think that's what Debbie's got in hers, actually, or somewhere.
Ruth, come in. Ruth Clark.
Yeah, I've Googled this thing about the gravestones, and there's something about the Ministry of Justice managing the safety of burial ground memorials. I don't know the details, but I think there's some formal process that you have to go through, I think, around gravestones, isn't there?
Can I say that anything to do with that, you would have to contact the diocese because it would almost certainly require faculties.
Yeah.
So I suppose Smith would be a starting point to ask what you could do and what permissions would be required.
Yeah, so that was for Hilary, I think.
Yes,
that's what you're asking, wasn't it, Hilary?
Yes, yeah.
It's a fairly formal process that you can't just twiddle them around, I think, on your own. Can you?
No.
Can I just say to Debbie, I used the water butt came on a stand, which was about dustbin lid sort of size and about 18 inches deep, perhaps. So I just turned it upside down and I put it in the ground at my allotment, and I have had frogs in there. So it's just a tiny pond, but it's deep enough to for some amphibians to live in. And you could fill it with stones so that it's still moist, and put some marsh marigolds or irises in it, so it's not deep water. But it's just like a bog garden.
Yes, yeah. I was thinking of putting some bricks and guessing that in King's Heath, that the Kitchen Garden Cafe garden shop there, there's aquatic plants, and so I was thinking of just having a couple of those, but just enhancing the site ever more, really. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Got her hand up.
Yes, come in then. Yeah, jump in. Yeah. Sorry, who is it?
Claire.
Oh, Claire. Yes, Claire.
Hi. I had a question for any churches. It's an Eco Award question. There is a section on there around conserving water and with water butts. So just a question for any churches that have managed to do this. So I can't remember the exact wording, but in the Eco Award, it talks about installing water butts in the churchyard to conserve water. I'm kind of puzzled a little bit on this. We do have a water butt in our churchyard, and we encourage people to use that, when they're watering plants around the graves and things like that. We can't put any water butts up against the church itself because it's 15th century and the DAC don't want us to do that because it interferes with the guttering. So we're quite restricted. So we've just got one water butt that we're using. My kind of query on it for anyone else who's done this is, in the Eco Award, the number of points for the water butt, it's 20, which is kind of the highest of anything on an Eco Award, and it just puzzles me somewhat that It's a little disproportionate to me, and I wonder, am I misunderstanding something around this, or can anyone shed any light on, is there anything else that we need to be doing?
It sounds to me like an enthusiast got their way in the drawing up of the, I think sometimes the criteria are very unbalanced, and I think they worked on it over the years, probably a bit, but maybe other people have got other observations. Any thoughts on this?
I don't know, but I wonder whether what perhaps they're getting at is if you're actually doing rainwater collection off your guttering for flushing loos and things. It doesn't sound like that. I mean, I don't think that's what it says, but I wonder if that's what they were, because I could understand that having quite a significant points tally.
Yeah, I mean, we did, so I did read up about that as well, and there's an example on the Eco Award of a church who've done that, who've used the grey water for flushing toilets, but they do say that that system cost £8,000, and it isn't actually, it hasn't saved them any money, so it is an expense. And I guess, you know, my feeling on that was there's probably a lot more beneficial things that, you know, like to ask the PCC to do before asking them to spend £8,000 on a grey water system, and again, that just doesn't seem to be, you know, it certainly in our church doesn't seem to be a good use of church money. So you know, even a climate stewards project, for example, I think would be a far better use of £8,000 than a grey water system. So just, I don't know if anyone's got any other thoughts or any insight around that. Anyone who's progressed further up the Eco Award system? Sheena's waving at me.
Yes, Sheena.
Yeah. We haven't got any water butts on the church. There are water butts in the vicarage and the garden, the vicarage gardens adjacent to the church. But I think if you've got one water butt, then you tick that box. And I have to say, when they came round, they didn't even check on it.
Okay.
They didn't go and look in the vicarage garden. I mean, you know, it's difficult to know how what they're going to look for. But as I say, we had vicarage garden water butts, and that was sufficient. Okay. So we obviously got the points for it. So just go ahead, I'd say, and try.
Okay. No, thank you.
Great. Good. Okay. Further thoughts? Anybody with their hand up? I can't see anybody wanting to speak at the moment. Am I missing anybody? Call out if I am.
I don't think so.
No. Okay. Okay. Good. All right then. Well, perhaps we're coming to a natural ending of this meeting. I've certainly learned a lot and been really encouraged by so much that we've heard tonight, and I just think so many amazing things are happening in churches that are so different from each other. So thank you once again very, very much for coming. There is a fourth Backer meeting in this series, and it isn't until the very beginning of September. And at that one, we're going to return to the subject of the warm churches, warm communities crisis that became so apparent last winter in particular, and how that all ties up with the ongoing attempts to address energy, how it's produced, energy, how it's paid for, and how in churches we're all bound up with those important questions. So that's in September. Please look out for that one. And in the meantime, thanks ever so much, everybody, for coming. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye. Thanks so much.
Thank you for inviting me. Bye.
Debbie, thanks so much. Thanks, Sandra. Thanks for coming. Thanks, Caroline.
Yes, thank you very much.
Now I have to work out how to stop recording because the record button has disappeared.
Ah, I don't know. Perhaps just end the meeting for all. I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. Anyway,
Caroline, thanks so much for hosting this. I know that that was a stretch, and with everything else you've got on, particularly today as well, you did a great job. So thanks so much, Caroline, and
no problem.
That was a super meeting, and thank you for doing that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I thought it hung together well, and and the inspiration from the other churches is really great.
It is. It really is. Okay, so I think probably I'm going to go then and release you. Thanks so much.
I think I may have found